What's up, guys? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more of our videos. Also, make sure you follow us all over social media so you don't miss any of our content or show announcements. I thought the Timberwolves sent a message tonight. There was a certain dynamic after the first 4 games of this series where it was clear that the Wolves had won the key swing stretches of the series, but it was also clear that the Lakers had some advantages, and there were extended stretches of the series where they had success, right? Like through the first 3 quarters of Game 4, for instance, or in Game 3 up until the point where it was tied 103-103 with a few minutes left, or all of Game 2 when they were in control, right? Like the first 2 games, they trade blowouts, and then you have these 2 knockdown, drag-out fights in Minnesota that come down to the final few possessions, and in both games, the Wolves did look better. But you could at least talk yourself into the Lakers having a chance, right? Well, Luka was very sick in Game 3 of the series. There were a couple of calls that went against the Lakers late in Game 4, right? You could at least talk yourself into the Lakers having underachieved and potentially being capable of regaining control of the series. Tonight was the game where the Wolves sent the clear message that they're just the better basketball team. They jumped them early. Throughout the game, it was abundantly clear that the Wolves were able to generate offense easier. The only reason the Timberwolves didn't win this game by 25-something points is how many wide-open threes they ended up missing. You want to know a big part of how Rudy Gobert ended up with 9 rebounds? It's because all these wide-open threes were clanging off the rim as the Lakers were in transition. That could have gotten way uglier than it looked on the scoreboard. Their defense seemed to clearly win. I always talk about that battle, like which unit is going to make the opposing unit more uncomfortable. I thought the defense for the Timberwolves clearly did a better job of making the Lakers uncomfortable than vice versa. The dead giveaway was tonight. There were these possessions where Austin, LeBron, and Luka would all be on the floor together. 2 of them would be on the floor, and the Wolves would be switching, and every defender on the floor would be a good defender, and it looked like the Lakers didn't have a guy who was like, give me the fucking ball, I'm going to go to work here. All of them were kind of hot potatoing the ball around because none of them really felt comfortable attacking any of the matchups. Any ground that the Lakers seemed to gain as a half-court offense was lost in this game. I thought the Wolves clearly demonstrated that they were the better team tonight and removed any doubt as to any of the weird factors that might have had any effect shifting the early games of the series. Rudy Gobert was amazing tonight as an offensive rebounder and as a vertical spacer. The Lakers tried to do a lot more doubling against Anthony Edwards tonight. That led to a lot of weak side disadvantages, meaning like guards trying to box out Rudy, or in many cases, nobody trying to box out Rudy. I thought LeBron had one of his worst games of the series, probably his worst game of the series in terms of his defensive activity and his work on the defensive glass. And when, like, the problem is when LeBron's not really engaged on the defensive glass, this team just can't rebound. They just don't have the size on that back line. And Rudy Gobert just bullied them over and over and over again. 27 points and 24 rebounds. That's an unbelievable stat line for Rudy Gobert in a closeout game. And a big moment for him, especially after what happened between him and Luka last year in the postseason. It had to have been feeling good for Rudy Gobert there, heading back to the locker room after closing that deal. I thought Julius Randle was awesome the entire series. I thought he was awesome on defense. I thought, with exception of a handful of bad shots here or there, I thought he was effective as a scorer. I thought that he peaked late in games, was great creating advantages out of the post and high post in the fourth quarter of tonight's game. He did work on the offensive glass in Game 4. Julius, this is one of the few things with Minnesota that I had a good read on coming into the series. I believed in Julius Randle. I thought that he was a victim of circumstance in most cases previously in his playoff career, and I thought that he demonstrated that he's capable of being a very impactful playoff player in this series, specifically because of his size and physicality and how that translates into these uber physical environments. And, you know, one of the things we talked about in after the Julius Randle trade was the idea that, you know, Karl Anthony Towns is a better basketball player than Julius Randle in a vacuum, right? And there are certain things that he does that were helpful to Minnesota, specifically his ability to space the floor, right? But with Julius Randle, from the day the trade was made, one of the things I talked about was he is a better high post, low post shot creator than Karl Anthony Towns. He's better at that specific gift, right? And in the fourth quarter tonight, they went to him repeatedly there in that spot against LeBron, against Luka, against Austin Reeves. And he repeatedly got to his spot in the middle of the floor for shots or right at the front of the rim. He was dominant tonight. And I thought he clearly demonstrated that he's capable of being an impactful playoff player when he's healthy and in rhythm. And there was no advantage attacking Julius. There was nothing that LeBron was getting on Julius one-on-one. There was nothing that Luka was getting on Julius one-on-one. It's a good matchup for him, and it'll be interesting to see, let's say, if he faces a Golden State in the next round, a team that more attacks his focus and discipline defensively, because it's going to be so much more about navigating the blender of the Golden State offense and having to chase around smaller, quicker players. But in this kind of matchup where it's like a team led by two bully ball forwards, Julius proved to be a very impactful defensive player because of his ability to hold up on an island in those situations. Jaden McDaniels got his ass kicked by Luka Doncic last year in the postseason. I thought he just did a way better job this year with his physicality, shrinking that space as Luka was trying to get into his step back in the mid-range. There was none of that dynamic we saw last year where it looked like Luka was constantly dislodging Jaden McDaniels off of his base and just getting wherever he wanted to on the floor. I thought he did a much better job on Luka in this series than he did last year. He also showed the pop as a weak side scoring forward. We've talked so much about this as like a very important player archetype this year. And look, there were games where he wasn't as effective. He wasn't very good in game 2 offensively. He wasn't very good tonight offensively. But there were games in this series, specifically game 1 and games 3 and 4 at stretches, where he was profoundly impactful offensively because of the ability to be that weak side scoring forward. And it wasn't even knocking down threes. It was catching and ripping on closeouts and just repeatedly getting to the rim, doing damage on the offensive glass. He had 2 more offensive rebounds tonight. Like, Jaden McDaniels was better in this series than he was last year. Naz Reid, I thought the story of his series was late game shot making. They probably don't win game 3 or game 4 if not for Naz Reid being able to come in and provide the scoring off of the bench in that situation the way he was able to, providing Anthony Edwards with a clean kick-out read on the left wing in Game 3, him scoring out of action in Game 4, coming off of a horns action, or in transition in Game 4, attacking Austin Reeves in a post-up and getting to his right shoulder hook and finishing in the lane. Naz Reid was a huge part of their ability to score down the stretch in this series. Dante DiVincenzo, his ball pressure throughout the series, especially on Austin Reeves. There were stretches of this series, like tonight, for example, where he looked more impactful than Austin in this series. Like, there was just down the line so many great contributions from a Minnesota team. And look, here's the deal. If you're going to win a series in 5, when you were an underdog going into the series, it's going to require a bunch of guys down the roster winning their matchups. And there were just so many examples of that in this series. And so before we talk a little bit more about the superstar matchup, I want to get into our course correction segment with Microsoft with respect to Anthony Edwards. Welcome to Course Correction, brought to you by Microsoft. Just like star players and teams navigating performance hurdles, business decision makers today are under immense pressure to get things right. They must rise to the occasion, turning challenges into opportunities. Microsoft empowers these visionaries with AI solutions, simplified cloud and data management, and trustworthy, responsible AI. And when you're in the NBA, you have your own hurdles to face. In this segment, we will highlight the player every week that has risen to the occasion when his team needed him. Whatever challenge you're facing, Microsoft empowers you with the expertise to say, bring it on. This week's player of the week is Anthony Edwards and his dominance in the Lakers-Timberwolves series. I thought Ant was fantastic tonight in a way that won't show up in the box score. 5 for 19, right? Didn't have a single turnover and 8 assists. The third game in the series were his high playmaking totals with low turnovers. He, throughout this game, specifically in the second quarter when the Lakers started bringing a lot of double teams, Ant was fantastic in that second quarter stretch. And then like multiple times in the fourth quarter tonight, just making simple reads, like that simple driving kick out read off of Luka to Mike Conley in the right corner. There were so many examples where, you remember in game 2 when Ant had 0 assists, how I talked about how he didn't make the strong side corner pass a single time and how it was there and he just wasn't making it. There in that second quarter, he was making it, just trusting Nickeil Alexander-Walker there in the right corner, even after he just airballed a shot from the same spot. You know how mature it is for him in that situation to go, I'm not going to force the issue here. I'm just going to dump it right back to the strong side corner because it's open and Nickeil's going to confidently step into the shot and knock it down. I thought he was so mature as a half-court surgeon in this series. And then in the big moments in game 3 and game 4 down the stretch, game 3, tie game late, step back 3, boom, step back 3, boom, driving kick to Naz Reid on the left wing, boom. He was fantastic down the stretch. Game 4, starts the fourth quarter down double digits, hits 3 ridiculous off the dribble jump shots that immediately changed the tone and tenor of the game. Had another driving kick to Dante DiVincenzo on the left wing who drove it for an and one. Every time this series was hanging in the balance one way or the other, Anthony Edwards grabbed the reins resoundingly and just took control of the series. He has solidified himself, in my opinion, as a top 5 player in this league. I saw some comments on Twitter earlier today talking about how the Lakers' lack of rim protection was allowing people to get fooled by Anthony Edwards again. And don't get me wrong, there's no doubt that rim protection combined with a better perimeter athlete will present a different problem for Anthony Edwards, right? Like Derrick Jones Jr. and Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, different type of challenge defensively than what the Lakers presented. I'd even argue the Warriors, with their ability to put a guy like Moses Moody on the ball, who's just a bigger, better athlete than the Lakers have on the perimeter, and Draymond Green on the back line, is going to be a bigger challenge. And I think Steve Kerr is a better coach than JJ Redick. I think the Warriors are overall a better, smarter team than the Lakers. I think that the Warriors defense, as I've consistently said this year, is just another level above what the Lakers are defensively. So Ant's going to have another challenge in the next round. It's not going to be the same, but I think trying to minimize Ant's success in this series to just the Lakers lacking rim protection is missing the point. He was below 50% in the restricted area before tonight's game. I haven't seen the numbers from tonight, but I would imagine he was below 50% in the restricted area again. He did not win this series getting to the rim. He won this series making quality decisions as a point guard and with his over-the-top shot making. And those were the things last year that failed him in the Dallas series. And so, yeah, like there's more challenges ahead. This Lakers team, I think, has been pretty clearly revealed in this first round series as a team that was not as good as I thought they were. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But with Ant moving forward, I did think that this was a positive step in his development, the next level that he had to pass. There's more levels ahead. He's got a long way to go. But I think he's clearly in the top 5. I think he's clearly a top-tier superstar in this league. He was fantastic defensively all series long in this matchup. I thought Ant was just amazing. That's it for this week's course correction. Remember, Microsoft's AI solutions empower you to take bold steps and make informed decisions, sparking new ideas to help drive your business forward. With Microsoft as your trusted partner, you can navigate your journey with confidence, finding innovative solutions and reaching new possibilities. Visit Microsoft.com/challengers to learn more. So, where did I go wrong picking this series? There's 2 main areas. The big one is like I thought that Anthony Edwards just cleanly and clearly outplayed Luka Doncic in this series. I just thought he was the better basketball player on both ends of the floor. And, when I came into the series, I just thought that was a matchup that Luka would win. And I thought like Ant would be closer to where LeBron was, as like a guy that looked like somewhere in the 5 to 10th best player in the league, but not being able to be the same kind of commanding presence that Luka is as an offensive force in the series. And Ant just was able to flip that dynamic. And for all of the talk, I've seen a lot of talk. I saw Carson Breber, my friend from Nerd Sesh, do a video yesterday talking about depth and how important depth is in the NBA. And I don't disagree. I think depth is super important. It'd be really nice if you could have a depth piece that you can go to. Everyone was bitching at a JJ Redick for not playing any of his bench guys in game 4. How did Jared Vanderbilt look down the stretch tonight, guys? Like there wasn't exactly a guy that JJ trusted to put out there in those situations, right? The reality is though, is that in these sorts of situations, it comes down to when you're in the half court, your superstar has a superpower. And that superpower is what overcomes surrounding circumstances. And like that's the reality. Like the Lakers couldn't score in this series. They had shooting on the floor. They had play finishing on the floor. And when they generated fantastic looks, they went in. But it came down to ultimately Luka could not create that initial advantage. He could not beat his one-on-one defender profoundly enough to dictate that second defender that could get the defense in rotation and allow the Lakers to generate wide open shots. He wasn't able to do it effectively enough. On the other end of the floor, Anthony Edwards and what he does was dictating 2, sometimes 3 defenders every single time down the floor. And so his team was able to repeatedly generate fantastic looks. And so here's the thing. Do I think the Lakers roster has issues? Yeah. They need to get a legitimate bona fide center. We're going to talk about some of the other kind of like deficits that they have and where the Lakers should go from here. I didn't think JJ Redick had a good series, but ultimately, I thought it came down to Luka outplayed Ant, Julius Randle outplayed LeBron. It's really difficult to overcome that, no matter how good your coach is, no matter how deep you are, no matter what other kind of cards you can pull out of the deck, so to speak. If your stars get beat, it's going to be really hard to win. And like when I saw that, that message from Carson, like I think it's valuable in terms of like just how athletic the game is now, with how fast everyone plays. To have 7 or 8 guys that you really trust is a huge asset. But I look at the Denver series, and I think that they're winning because Jokic is the best player and he's dominating the star matchup. And Jamal Murray is kicking James Harden's butt. And I look at this series, and I think Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle outplayed Luka and LeBron. And I look at the Celtics Magic series, and I'm watching Game 4, pivotal Game 4 down on the road in Orlando. And Jason Tatum is surgical on one end of the floor, and Paolo Banchero looks like he doesn't know what he wants to do on the other end of the floor. Even looking at the Pacers series, how did the Pacers pull that out down the stretch? Tyrese Halliburton just backpacked the team in crunch time. And ultimately, I still think having the best player in a series really does matter. Even though depth also matters, I think that this was a good example, and there were several examples in this first round of the star matchup playing a big role in how these series go. So where do the Lakers go from here? We can get more into it in the mailbag. I'd imagine we're going to talk a lot of like big picture Lakers stuff here and on playback here in a little bit. But like I thought there were obvious athleticism deficits. If there's one thing that I just didn't listen to my own, like I let my heart get in front of my head, so to speak. I watched every single minute of the Minnesota Timberwolves kicking the shit out of the Denver Nuggets last year. I watched every single minute of the Minnesota Timberwolves kicking the shit out of the Phoenix Suns last year. I watched probably like the better part of 40, 45 Minnesota Timberwolves games this year. Like I watched them and I repeatedly came on the show and said, man, the upside with the Wolves is they can just maul everybody when they get into the playoffs and the refs swallow the whistles and it just turns into a bloodbath and everyone just kind of seems powerless under those waves of size and athleticism. I knew it. And I didn't properly factor it in. It was just foolishness on my part. And it's a lesson learned, a valuable lesson learned. But I do think there's some reality with the Lakers roster build and their lack of athleticism. And this to me is something to keep in mind with the build moving forward. I think there was a lot of talk coming out of this series, even when things were going poorly, and even before the series, about the Lakers just need a center. How Austin Reeves is the perfect kind of co-star to have alongside Luka Doncic. He kind of fits the mold of the Jalen Brunson, Kyrie Irving idea of having like a shot-creating guard next to Luka. And, LeBron James is this guy that can operate as like a defensive fulcrum and a ball screen fulcrum / secondary ball handler, whatever you need. I look at it now and I go, I don't know that you can be athletic enough with Austin Reeves and Luka Doncic as core players. And so I think the Lakers, when they look at their kind of like their coffers going into this offseason, you have, if I'm not mistaken, at least one first round pick, because I think they gave up the other one in the AD trade. So you have one first round pick. You've got, I think, at least one pick swap. You've got the Dalton Connect piece, which I think is a young player that some teams would value. And then Austin Reeves is one of the best assets in the league because of his salary and what he makes, right? So I think that the Lakers have to start seriously considering the reality that if they play Austin next to Luka in the big picture, there is an athleticism deficit. And if you're not freaky athletic at the other 3 spots, it might not be tenable. And so, and by the way, that doesn't mean that Austin, I'm a big believer in Austin, and I absolutely think that Austin can have success in a championship context. I think Austin got humbled a little bit in the series. I think that Austin was revealed to have two major shortcomings. One, his ability to handle physicality. I think he'll spend a good amount of the summer in the weight room. I think also Austin was exposed as a poor catch and shoot player. And I think he's going to have to spend a lot of time this summer if he's going to stay alongside Luka operating as a catch and shoot player. But beyond that, it's about the matchup, right? So the Wolves kick your ass in large part because they just have all these bodies, right? And so like Ant Edwards had Austin Reeves in jail in this series. And so Austin has to find a way to be impactful even when he's not able to score the basketball effectively. Not turning the basketball over by not struggling against that physicality, by adding strength and working on ball handling through physicality. And then two, becoming a better catch and shoot player so that you can be at least an asset off the ball offensively. There were in each of these last two games, at least like 8 or 9 clean catch and shoot looks that Austin missed that literally could have changed both games. If Austin shot the ball better from 3 tonight, they very easily could have won tonight. If Austin shot the ball better from 3 in game 4, they very easily could have won game 4. That is a piece of low-hanging fruit for Austin that he can improve on. He needs to become a better catch and shoot player. But regardless, in the big picture, I tend to look at it as though you're putting yourself in a bind building around Luka with Austin being as unathletic as he is. And so there's a version of this where, like, if you put Austin on the Orlando Magic, he'd be incredible there because he would be anchored by big, strong athletes all over the floor. And his specific trait, his skill set, which revolves around like high-level skill on ball offensively, becomes very valuable in the context of that team, right? So, like, I think what we've noticed here is, yeah, because guys, you don't want to overreact to the Timberwolves matchup, but at the same time, you're going to run into a big athletic team if you're going to win the title. It's like, it's a prerequisite. You're going to have to overcome a team that's probably bigger and more athletic than you, right? And so with that being the case, I think with the Lakers moving forward, they have to at least explore the idea of flipping Austin for a bona fide two-way athletic starter of some kind to anchor alongside Luka. The obvious need for a vertical spacer, I think that, I think Luka had a really bad offensive series. I thought he was exposed as a poorly conditioned athlete. He consistently faded towards the end of games. He missed back-to-back games where he had bad misses right at the rim that directly led to run-out layups or run-out transition threes that hurt the team. He obviously has a lot that he can get better at, but at the same time, there's some clear stuff that you can do to make his life easier, and one of those is get him a legitimate screen and roll threat. Get him somebody that you can sit in the dunker spot and that can create that vertical spacing window, right? Now, that is not, I saw a lot of talk surrounding that in this series that I don't necessarily agree with. There was a lot of talk about, like, play Jackson Hayes. The TNT broadcast was being ridiculous, constantly panning to Jackson Hayes every single time Rudy Gobert got an offensive rebound. Does anybody remember what it looked like when Jackson Hayes was on the floor in this series? He's awful. He can't do anything on either end of the floor. That was not going to be an answer after what we saw off of the early parts of the series. But going back to the Boston series last year, there will inevitably be a team that can switch that action. And so, like, the 5-out spacing look would have been a counter against Boston in a way that the vertical spacing piece wasn't, because of Tatum and Jaylen Brown's ability to switch the Doncic Lively and the Doncic Gafford pick and rolls, right? And so, like, yeah, you want to get him a center, but most of this still comes down to, in order for Luka to be able to carry a team through 4 playoff rounds, he has to become a more better conditioned athlete. Luka got blown by or gave up a bucket on 5 possessions before the first TV timeout tonight. In the fourth quarter, it was just give the ball to Ant or Julius against Luka, and they were going right around him for the bucket. He's got to find a way to be better than he has been on that end of the floor. He's got to find a way to be better in the fourth quarters offensively against these bigger athletic teams. And the only way he's going to get there is if he does the work that Steph Curry and so many other of the lesser athletes in NBA history have done, which is work obsessively on conditioning so that you can hold up as that situation gets more complicated later in these postseason series.